are going live. Hey, welcome to Mosaic
Hello.
Live. Sundays at 5.
Yay.
Um, so today, as I was saying, is the day of the forest defender. Um, and thanks for coming, y'all, to talk about it.
Of course, of course.
Um, so just to kind of explain right off the bat for people who are not in the know, Tortuguita is was a forest defender who was assassinated on this day 3 years ago in 2023 by a joint task force of Atlanta Police, DeKalb Police, and the Georgia State Patrol. And this was related to the movement to stop Cop City. They had come to Atlanta to help us resist the construction of this militarized police training center over the forests and protect nature. And that is why they were shot 57 times. And, since then we have, his mother has, their mother, I'm sorry, they had they, them, gender, and I will try not to make that mistake. They were a non-binary person. They were a member of the Industrial Workers of the World. They were a trained street medic and someone who just cared very deeply about healing and promoting, nature, the vibrancy of life, the play of life, and opposing those things that destroy that, like Cop City.
You were about to say something about Tortuguita's mom.
Right. So she has come up here. She was just here today speaking at the vigil that was held today in Tort's honor, and she attempted to get another investigation going. The idea was investigate, prosecute these killer cops who killed them. And obviously that didn't work out. The GBI investigated themselves and found no wrongdoing, and claimed that Tort was like a terrorist who was shooting at them. And so that went nowhere. And now she is working on building something to kind of honor his legacy down in Panama, the Tortuguita Healing Center. So we'll put the donation link in the description, but that's a continued thing that we're raising money for and trying to get people out there for, to go and build this, basically the opposite of Cop City, like very sustainable, very eco-friendly construction. And the whole point of it is to teach people about these issues of ecological health and hopefully heal people.
Right. I'm glad you're going to post a link to Tortuguita Healing Center. This is the first time I'm hearing about it. Um,
Yeah, it's a
and I
really
wonder.
positive.
Yeah, I was at a protest the night that happened. I remember it really well because number one, I was there with one of Brett, one of our mutual comrades, and I remember being in an incredibly grim mood that entire day for personal reasons, and my mood didn't improve since. And from the perspective of, I don't know, we were attempting to motivate people that day, and there were many new faces that day, and from a 30,000 foot looking down from a mountain view, it's always great to see new faces, but from the discussion of martyrdom, the view never changes. We could be talking half of the names that were killed by the police in Atlanta over the last decade, and there are always grim stories, and I don't have a lot of positive things to say about it. It's great that this healing center is having fundraising. We could be talking about similar healing or community center efforts to other people who you could consider martyrs. And if you're just hearing about this for the first time, I encourage you to donate. But also, I'm never in a mood to motivate people. I'm never in a mood to give optimistic conversations. If you're looking for like a day to be, I take the day off from giving the motivating speeches on days like this. I'm here and I came to it, and I'll probably have some insights worth sharing. But uh, yeah, it's just a historically grim day for me when looking back at that day, because I wasn't having a good day that day.
Yeah, I don't think any of us were having a good day that day. That was,
Well,
when I
well,
think back, I mean, I think that, some of the main things that I felt when it happened, and first let me address, I do think that there can be some issues with the way that people are about the whole idea of like martyrs. I do consider Tortuguita a martyr in this sense, and I don't think that that's a bad thing to celebrate our martyrs, but it's it's bad when that becomes sort of like a I guess when people take it to the level where it's better to die or something. Obviously, it would be better if Tortuguita survived.
I don't think anybody, well, I won't say I don't think anybody. I don't think anybody here in this room today feels that way necessarily.
I think that there is a really positive, constructive aspect of celebrating, people like this, because I think it's an important part of how we construct our society and our values. And as we're trying to change society towards new anti-capitalist values, I think it's a big part of it, and this stuff that has gone on in the name of Tortuguita after their death, I think and I hope that they would be very pleased if they could see it. That in a sense we, especially the Tortuguita Healing Center, I feel like represents in some ways a fulfillment of what they wanted to achieve. It's like, because they were so dear
very well
to us.
said. You're on the right track there.
Yeah, like because they were so dear to us, it's changed the way we move to carry their influence over after they're gone.
I'm pretty sure I met Tort once, but we never spoke.
I knew Tort somewhat. I don't consider that I was super close with Tort, but I met them very early on, and I always liked them. I always saw them as someone who could be a very close friend, and unfortunately I just never had the chance to develop that friendship. And so emotionally, that's what comes back when I think back to that day. Like, the actual day was like, oh crap, let's try and protect people and the forest because they're coming, right? Like, we knew they were coming. We were trying to, I'm not going to get into anything more than that, but the day of was like survival mode. The emotions were not being processed yet. And we didn't even know in the fog of war who it was who got killed. We just knew someone got killed. So the next day was when I woke up and I learned who it was. And I cried. And I thought I actually processed what was happening. And I remember feeling like it was a huge wake-up call that has carried over into every day of my life now. I live with this lesson that our time is so valuable and you never know how much you have. Our time and our relationships, we always want to put things off until later, but the world is moving fast, and eventually there is no more later.
One of the great things I think that comes out of Tortuguita's murder is just the kind of exposure of the inadequacy of police forces to provide any kind of safety. And so I think many of us are more inspired to think about alternatives to police. And I'm wondering, Brett, if you, sorry to put this on you, if you can find, I don't know, a link to alternatives to the police to add to the link that you're including for the Tortuguita Healing Center.
Well, that's a pretty robust other discussion to get into, and we can get into that some. But there's a lot to talk about with just the Day of the Forest Defender. I mean, in the context of this, like, people like Tortuguita who were living in the forest, they were living in an autonomous zone. There was no police. So when conflict arose, when people had issues with each other, they had to actually put those abolitionist practices into practice immediately. Like,
right. I'm just saying that the murder by the police is just another example of how we cannot depend on them.
Yeah.
But yes, like many communities living quote unquote off grid, oftentimes integrate alternative ways of cultivating safety beyond, policing one another in their communities. Right. But I'm just saying that the details, considering that Tortuguita was not necessarily a threat, right? Yet they were still murdered, is just another reminder for us and others listening that we cannot depend on police forces.
Yeah, and I mean, the police narrative was that Torch shot at them. That is what they claim. The independent autopsy that their mother got to happen showed that was not the case. The police were lying. And I think a lot of people would also say, it's tempting to look for the silver lining, but I think there would be some people, especially those who are close to Tort, who would hear that and think, oh my gosh, no, that's, we didn't need that to know that, right? But maybe some people did. Certainly, a lot of people who were not as involved or aware of the movement suddenly became aware of it after that, because the big newspapers were reporting on it.
Do we know of any attempts to hold the, I can't remember, but I wonder if you all can recall any attempts to hold the police officer that killed Tortuguita accountable? What did that sort of lead to?
Well, that's what I was referring to with like their mom's attempt to initiate a GBI investigation.
Okay, yes, but beyond using Georgia Bureau of Investigation,
okay, I'll tell you about the autonomous actions of some other forest defenders, who then were, get this, charged with domestic terrorism for this act. What act? We found out exactly who killed Tortuguita, right? And some people took it upon themselves to make posters with the person's face. Go to their neighborhood, and the posters say, "This person's a killer cop. This person killed Tortuguita." And put those up all around the neighborhood, right? That is the act on which cases of domestic terrorism that are still pending are based on.
Yeah, these are, I think, historically unprecedented times where we are now encouraged to think about not just defunding police, but completely removing police forces and their apparatuses, like the Georgia Bureau of Investigation, which I imagine is more of a judicial kind of unit.
Oh, it's executive. No, it's a police force.
That we cannot depend on. And it's, I mean, I don't know what to say. Like, I know we can't really depend on our executive or judicial systems, and maybe not even international organizations that might typically, exist to hold these kind of forces accountable.
The Georgia Supreme Court, right? Like that also is part of this whole trial with the GBI. So, yeah.
Right. I would not put my trust in the Georgia Supreme Court at all. Mm-hmm. But I'm encouraged. Like, now, I think many of us are waking up to really the possibility of a real sort of revolution or systems change.
Yeah. And I think this discussion is happening. Sorry to interrupt.
No, go ahead.
Well, this is the discussion that's happening nationally around ICE right now. ICE is getting so brutal. Probably a majority of people are saying abolish ICE because of this, right? This issue is kind of a way to look at it that goes deeper than ICE. This was happening before Trump under the Democrats. This was happening with local police forces. And it's the same kind of stuff. So, yeah, I think, like, that's one way that we should look at this is, like, for one, it's a civil rights crisis. And two, in being that, it's sort of a prelude to the civil rights crisis that we're having with ICE on a federal level.
I don't have the exact polling data in front of me, but it's in the 40s in terms of, abolish ICE polling.
Right.
40%. Let's say nearly half. Let's say, yeah.
And I think in America that's relatively high for, like, abolish anything, I think we can only expect it to go up.
Yeah.
But what I think was amazing about this movement to defend the forest that Tortuguita was a part of, and keep in mind, this killing of Tortuguita was not the beginning or the end. That was right in the middle. Literally, where it's 3 years past and roughly 3 years after the whole thing started. And um, what was I gonna say about that? Um, what was amazing about it was both a mass movement, very deeply rooted in the surroundings, the local people, and also it was overwhelmingly of an abolitionist mindset of abolishing the police from the very start, and that guided the way that we moved. And I think that it led it to be a more effective protest movement than ones that rely on appeals to the state.
Right, right.
I mean, ultimately, Cop City was not stopped, but its footprint was reduced. They had to change the blueprint because
Right. I like to think that Cop City was very much interrupted. Maybe we can't say
yes,
stopped completely,
it was
but
3 years
indeed
late,
interrupted.
maybe 4
You,
years late.
I'm also, as we're talking, I'm wondering about the significance of police force members choosing to retire early, maybe due to a growing critique of the policing in this country that they might not have been aware of. Um,
I think if
have y'all
they
heard?
can retire early, they're probably going to, right? I think the retirement is sort of the carrot on the string that keeps them not quitting.
Right, and keep in mind, a lot of folks who are encouraged to join the police force, the military, are folks like us, sometimes coming from working poor, working class communities, trying to get debts and college
Mm-hmm.
fees paid off. Um, um, but I am very curious as to police members, former police members that have chosen to leave either through retirement or just leaving in general because of a growing consciousness with regard to the imperialist interest of policing in this country at the very least.
It's
Have y'all heard
certainly.
anything about this? Y'all know anyone that has left the force or even the military?
I know someone who left. I know several people who left the military, but I know someone who left being a correctional officer and would never do it again.
Yeah,
Yeah,
I
people
wish
change.
there were more concrete efforts to get those folks integrated into our organizing efforts. I'm not sure if that's going on or what that looks like, but
I don't
it's
think it's
definitely.
necessary. They don't need to be organized with integrated with our organizing efforts, because who's to say they are actually done being cops, right?
Well, speaking about those who are, you know what I mean,
Yeah.
and who just need community support, they're lacking knowledge, but just sort of need additional information about how to move forward.
Well, and even
Because folks get coerced into those kind of industries,
oh
and
yeah,
are not. They're thinking that they're protecting and doing good deeds. Um,
it's
um,
absolutely something that would have to happen for with the armed forces for there to be any real change, right? Um, and it needs to happen in general. Even people who aren't affiliated with any of that, like, there needs to be more stuff out there about what an average person can do without any other group, like just stuff that people can pick up and say, I'm going to put this into action right away. And I mean, while I think it's true that people need to be reached across all kind of divisions, and you know we want people to change their minds about those kind of things, we can also
It's a job
accept.
for someone. An ellipsis follows.
Uh-huh.
3 ellipses up, and the sentence trails off and goes nowhere, in my opinion.
I mean, we can recognize that, like, there, with all this money they are pumping into it, there's gonna be people who sell out and be cops. So, although that is a good thing to pursue, right? If we compare it to the movement to defend the forest, like, that's a strength of the movement to defend the forest. It doesn't rely on any of that. It's like, if you can't physically build the cop city, you can't use it. It doesn't matter if people want to, you know? I think that's very
Well
effective.
said.
The forest itself served as like an anchor point to the material world, where these abolitionist calls were no longer just ideological. It was like, here's something we can do, and like objectively, there's either a cop city there or not. We need to think about more things like that. What is that for ICE? And like, yes, let's go counter recruit, go get people to not sign up for ICE or get people to quit ICE, but also knowing that that's not ever going to be everyone in ICE. Like, what are the physical, how do you make this kind of stuff just not work?
One thing I think is useful is to focus on how our communities are cultivating a sense of safety among ourselves.
Absolutely.
Right, reminding ourselves of that. I'm wondering, Britt, if you could talk a little bit about the atmosphere at the vigil. Who was there? Who spoke? Or I know usually vigils are mostly silent.
Well, like I mentioned,
and then, how did you feel leaving the vigil?
I wasn't leading the vigil. I've led the vigil before.
How did you feel once you left the vigil?
I felt good. It was a mournful atmosphere and a cheerful atmosphere at the same time, if that makes sense. There's a lot of camaraderie, a lot of people who I hadn't seen in a long time, and so I mentioned Tort's mother was there. You had musicians performing, and yeah, I won't go into any more of like who is there or not there, but a lot of people who have been close to Tort or have been, part of this movement for a very long time, and also lots of new people. But for me, after kind of dwelling in this world for so long, I go and I'm surrounded by familiar faces, including Tort's mom, and that's a good feeling.
And there were efforts to create a healing center of some kind here, but that was disrupted, right?
Well, that was the plan for what was to happen with the land instead of Cop City.
And I think that there was supposed to even be a closure of one of maybe the prison downtown. I could be misspeaking, but there were talks to essentially dismantle the prison to create a healing center. foundational kind of space.
That's interesting. I haven't heard of that connection there. I'm aware of campaigns to
Not
like close the jails, which are separate, but they're movements that
well,
do also kind of touch
actually,
on.
that, that was not only something that had been discussed, but something that Keisha Bottom had supported while running, and then stopped talking about once winning the election.
Oh, okay, yeah.
Yeah, and that was tied to close the jail and women on the rise. You could learn if you were to just type in close the jail ATL, you'd find the
Right.
whole history.
Thank you for that reminder. Yes, women on the rise.
That's interesting. Well, yeah, I mean, when I believe it was Rayshard Brooks was killed at the Wendy's back in 2020. The Wendy's, was burnt down in the 2020 protests. That place, where the Wendy's used to be, was suggested to become a Rayshard Brooks Peace Center, where there would be, almost like a civil rights museum kind of vibe, explaining what was going on and all of the issues with police brutality. But with the forest, it was a very collective thing. It was a lot of people decided in a very decentralized, democratic way, how would we, instead of Cop City, what would we put? And it wasn't just like healing, it was also like there was stuff planned for like kind of an employment center where people could get jobs and things relating to like food, I think like a food garden. And
There were workshops being planned. I had been, unfortunately, I was there the day there was a large fair that was at that Wendy's, and a 7-year-old got shot right after I left. Yeah, I remember that as well.
Dang, I heard about that back in 2020. Honestly,
yeah, I was there. Yeah, I was there at I had just left at that time shooting.
a whole live reflecting on 2020 might be in order. I mean, that seems a little intricate to cover in this one, but I mean, it's something to talk about for sure. It's an example of the community alternative to policing going wrong.
Shooting.
Yeah.
It was a great day except for the way it ended.
Yeah. And I mean, that's the serious consequence of not yet having our abolitionist security system figured out. Because like that was guys who, they were like self-appointed security guards, right?
Yeah.
And they shot the girl completely on accident.
Yep.
So
I could tell a whole story about that, but honestly, it will go into the realm of what's the word that people like to use? Internecine politics. There are a lot of just internal politics about how that all. That I don't feel like we should spend time on today. But
yeah, we need a full 2020 video sometime. But we got 15-ish minutes to talk about the legacy of Tortuguita, the forest. Tortuguita was a Venezuelan person and a non-binary person, and they were just
and was very, very young, right? Certainly was, taken away too early.
My age, I think. They're like 1 year older or younger than me.
Right. You're very young. We all are. Yes. We should not be dying today.
Yeah. Yeah.
But before you continue, Brett, I wonder if there are concrete movement or hashtag movement efforts beyond Tortuguita's death. Thank you for the reminder to support and or donate to the Healing Center, which I think you said is based in Panama.
That's right.
Right. What else beyond that? Are there any, I mean, of course, this conversation is certainly one effort, right? But are there more collective kind of solidarity efforts happening that I might not be aware of?
Well, I don't know if this is what you're asking, but what comes to mind for me is like the continuation of this would be defending the other threatened forests. So this forest, they've constructed over this forest. Trying to shut all that down again would be great, but also the next forest that's going to be torn down for something like this, like, can we try again? Can we keep trying until it works and we stop the thing? Except, like I said, though, it did work. Multiple years of delay. When I was in the forest, people were talking about that and saying, look, that represents multiple generations of butterflies that have been able to breed in this forest. That represents an untold amount of animal life that's been preserved during that time that may be long enough to help. Every little bit counts. And there are cop cities popping up in other cities where people in Charlotte, people in Nashville, people all over the U.S. can look for their impending cop city and go try and save that forest.
I'm really hoping that we can develop or grow a movement, maybe that's international or beyond state borders, that talks about police forces as generally unhealthy for us collectively or not good for our immune system. I'm sure there are people who might want scientific research to support that. But I think many of us living in this country would certainly agree that police forces and indeed the US military is just not good for our collective nervous systems and immune systems.
Yeah. I mean, I would argue that those things are all further along than you may realize.
That's
that
exactly
movement
what
exists.
I was going to say, boy, all of the scientific work that you'd like to imagine was done in Minneapolis in 2020.
Well, I mean,
so you can have enough scientific work to melt your eyeballs with the number of PDFs, graphs, charts, and documents that were made during that time.
I have a friend who right now, my friend is working on a publishing a paper about this, a scientific peer-reviewed paper with Tortuguita's mom as a co-author.
Okay, that's great. And I'm not one to necessarily be reading up on scientific research necessarily, but I'm just being mindful of the sort of culture that we live in. But yes, I think we're at the point where it's clear that, I mean, it's for many of us, it's just been clear, but I think a growing number of folks are becoming more aware of the, deep issues of our militarized police forces across, and I think once we start using that language or rhetoric, people will easily or better understand why we're so intent with regard to removing or abolishing police forces.
Definitely, yeah. And I said earlier how this movement to defend the forest had a very abolitionist character since its foundation. It also had a very internationalist character. And every time, which was frequently, that the state and the media were trying to draw these divisions between people and say, oh, you can't have an opinion on this if you're not from Atlanta city limits, even though the actual project is being built outside Atlanta city limits, where DeKalb County residents have no vote on it, right? That's part of it. That's like, it straddles these boundaries already. They were trying to tell us, you have to be from Atlanta or you have to be from DeKalb to participate in this movement. And the people of Atlanta and DeKalb were immediately coming back saying, no, we want everybody. We need all the help we can get. And people came from other countries, from Europe, from South America,
Right, and maybe we could see why that is, right? Because local experiences with violence certainly extend to experiences outside of a local area. It could be right? These are globally related too. You know what I mean? So
Yeah.
it was always bothering me when people were surprised that people who were not from DeKalb County or Atlanta were here. And it's like, first of all, Atlanta tries to sell itself as an international city, right? So we should understand that there's an international impact in much of our decision making. But right, this is just also a reminder that of the sort of nonsensical kind of arguments offered by people who support police, right?
And
when you say it's an international city, it's a city in the South, and in any civil rights issue, the narrative that resistance to civil rights issues comes from outside agitators is literally out of the 1960s without anything changed.
Well, and it's a complete double standard, right? Because we are expected to be confined by these geographical boundaries, but the police are calling in federal forces. They're bringing in police from Israel to go train at that cop city. So how does that make any sense, right? It's like anything else where when the state does it, it's fine, but if people do it themselves, it's illegal.
And speaking of Israel, it just reminds me of GILI, which is an acronym that I might get wrong. I feel like it stands for the Georgia International Law Enforcement Exchange. Yes, I think I got that right. And I feel like there might be an organizing effort happening at Georgia State University, which houses GILI, again, the Georgia International Law Enforcement Exchange, which is a partnership, right, with Israeli police forces. And please correct me if I'm wrong.
No, that's right, and that's what I'm referring to when I say that, like, they come to the cop city to train, but Atlanta cops go to Israel to train.
Right. Yes. Yes.
So that's part of it. It also involves other corrupt countries like Hungary. There's a variety of different countries on their list that they train with, but Israel is the one that really they utilize. I'm not sure how much goes on with all the others on that list.
And I know we are especially thinking about murders like Tortuguita's murder and the recent murder of Renee Green in Minneapolis. We're so focused on police forces and executive forces, if you will. But I'm also thinking about the complicity of academic institutions historically, right? And police violence and military violence, like a Georgia State University that thought it was fine to house GILI.
Right.
Right. And so I'm just thinking about how this extends just beyond police forces, but other kind of pillars, institutional pillars that make up our society.
Yeah.
Right. We send.
I mean, when we were, in the process of resisting Cop City, one of the ways that people did that was trying to look at, okay, this Atlanta Police Foundation is this big police union lobby pushing for Cop City and all these other things that are not in our interest. Who's funding it, right? And when we look at that, we start to unravel this interconnected infrastructure between the corporations, the police. It starts to explain why these corporations have so much power and, relative to the letter of the law or the politics of anything in a democracy, they're the ones shelling out the money to keep that police union in power, And when I say they, that includes media companies like Cox. It became very apparent when the Atlanta Journal-Constitution was not reporting on any of this, or was reporting on it in ways that was very sympathetic to the police, because they were owned by people who were trying to make the Cop City happen. We engaged in boycotts. There's Home Depot, Chick-fil-A. We try to boycott these large corporations that support these police foundations. Waffle House. And that's another example of how with this stuff we're getting closer to having an effect. We're getting closer to the stuff.
Yeah, a couple others. Go ahead.
Repeat that.
State Farm Arena.
Yes. Oh, State Farm Arena. Okay.
Yes, that's one. There's a big list of them, but Home Depot is one that I was really involved in promoting the boycott of, and Home Depot actually arrested me just for holding up a sign in their parking lot. They trespassed me. I was standing there for maybe not even a minute. They snatched up me and an 80-year-old lady and took us to jail for holding up a sign that said boycott Home Depot.
Right. Goodness.
But that's not going to stop
at the point. Yeah, we know that. I'm at the point where I really want to see an online and active sort of on the ground movement to defund the city of Atlanta at this point, just because that's where I'm at.
Right.
I'm in the city of Atlanta, you know what I mean?
Right.
And just, I think, covers all of the institutional spaces that are in agreement with police forces, like the sort of fast food restaurants that you just named out, along with the sort of larger retail businesses like a Home Depot.
Mm-hmm.
Yes, I definitely want to see a hashtag, boycott Atlanta or something akin to that.
Yeah. It's out there, and we'll try and make these things as available to people as possible. But, I mean, just to kind of provide some not closing it off yet, but starting on some closing thoughts. I mean, when we talk about an international movement, when Tortuguita died, within a matter of days, the very next day, vigils popped up over the entire United States, all the way to Europe, all the way to Syria. There were anarchist fighters in Syria showing their support for Tortuguita. All over the world, instantly. People were aware of what was happening in Atlanta, and it mattered to them. because it's a microcosm of this international capitalist system that we're all struggling together against.
Right, and I also want to say, in the spirit of the healing center that Tortuguita's mom has helped found, I'm assuming in Panama, it has me thinking about the names of folks who were murdered, probably even on the same day that Tortuguita was murdered, by
Right.
police, maybe defending their own bodies or homes. But it just went undocumented, or just didn't get circulated as much.
Right.
Um,
Actually, tomorrow.
Tortuguita was lucky enough to be a part of organized community, which provided some effort or some sort of ease at learning about their murder. But of course, many of us are not as well connected.
Right. There's been a lot of people who've been victimized by police brutality in Atlanta and elsewhere, and I think whether somebody was actively engaged in resistance when that happened to them or not, saying those names, keeping those memories alive is very important. And I think it's not just to remember the people, but it reminds ourselves, like, we don't have to take this as the state terror that they want it to be for us. We should look at these hardships and realize that the whole reason that they're doing this is to try to get us to lose heart. We should take heart from it. We should remember these people in a way that perpetuates in the future the things that they stood for, and that's our antidote to being terrified.
Right.
To being terrorized.
And I'm really hoping, though I would be hard pressed to believe in our Congress, but I'm really hoping that they tap into their intelligence and realize that they have the power to mobilize resources and efforts to arrest members of the Trump administration, including Donald Trump himself. For whatever reason, that is not happening. And I keep reminding folks, like, hey, yeah, we can arrest the president, listen.
I do not think that is happening, but it will be interesting to see. It would be interesting, maybe
Not
that could
today,
also be a
but
topic.
Boy, history has a long march. Yeah.
Wait, repeat that?
I said not today, but history's a long march.
That could be a good topic for another episode. Why or why not is that happening?
Right, and I'm very much hoping it happens today, at the very least tomorrow. You feel me?
Well, I want to mention also.
Okay, like,
I want to, since you mentioned other people who we may not know about their deaths in the same way, I want to mention that tomorrow, people in Paris, France, are taking part in an anti-fascist conference to remember two people who were killed on that day by a neo-Nazi in Russia. And that's, let me see here, Stanislav Markelov and Anastasia Baburova. So they were a human rights attorney and a reporter who were focused on getting justice for people who were victims of war crimes committed by the Russian armed forces in Chechnya. So I'll be speaking to that conference about Tortuguita and these other things that have happened here in Atlanta to try and draw those connections. But I'll bring their thing here to also say, you know, we should care about that too. That's part of the whole descent of Russia into what's going on.
And vice versa. Yeah, definitely.
Well, thanks again for just an amazing kind of brief conversation on a really important issue that's impacting many of us. Yeah.
Yeah, I
no,
mean,
thank
I know
you. I'm glad that hopefully this will help you decompress. Hopefully it will help you decompress, help the people who are at the vigil decompress. Hopefully months later, when people are, I mean, the specter of state violence hasn't left us yet. And whenever somebody wants the encouragement to continue or just a raw, authentic conversation, they can look back at the words spoken here and the perspectives that you both gave here this hour today, because I found it warming.
I sure hope so. I really think for a lot of people, the vigil has accomplished that, but hopefully we may accomplish that too. And the main thing that I hope we can do, because I know y'all are somewhat familiar, I hope that this video reaches people who are not even aware of what's going on here and inspires them to take a much more active role in resisting fascism.
Agreed. Yes, indeed.
I feel like giving a plug for a book I read this week. It's called This Nonviolent Stuff Will Get You Killed by Charles Cobb. It's a book about the history of the civil rights movement. And that once you leave the city, and especially, you know, this book wasn't, I mean, it talks a lot about organizing in colleges and in cities, but it also talks about rural culture, us being based in the Atlanta metro area. Sometimes we forget that gun culture existed white, black, brown, and every other color in rural areas where you're often isolated, and that the idea of nonviolent resistance as a tactic was often backed by people in those rural areas who had to defend their own homes in the South from real acts of terrorism. It's good for historical perspective. I hate to use the phrase, it could always be worse, but you'll definitely have that phrase come to mind as you read this book. Again, the book is called That Nonviolent Stuff Will Get You Killed by Charles Cobb.
Thank you, Brandon. Yeah, I mean, that's the kind of stuff we need to be brushing up on right now, because our rights are under attack, and if we want to keep them, we got to defend them. Well, thanks, guys. I think we can call it there. Mosaic Live, Sundays at 5.